What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to focus on basic color correction inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. Now, if you enjoy these videos and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel because I'm constantly updating new videos. That being said, let's get started. So we'll head down here in the timeline on the bottom. You'll notice I have a bunch of clips added. There's this one clip right here I'm going to focus on as far as going through the color changes. Now let's just head up here. We have the layouts, which I'm sure you're familiar with at this point, with the editing layout, which we're in right now. Let's head over to the color, which is right next door. Badoom. And then it switches to the coloring layout. So it kind of repositions things, but it's still the same layout. Let's just head over here to the right hand side. You'll notice this is panel, and I'm going to close this down. This is the standard Lumetri color panel, and we'll focus on a few different things. So this little section right here to the right, this is just the basic correction. If I click on it, you'll have a few different options. Click it, close it, and then there's creative tab, which is this. There's curves. There's also color wheel and match, HSL secondary, and then vignetting. But right now, let's just focus on the basic color correction. So I'm going to click to open that up so we have a few options. You also notice over in the source panel, just like we normally have the edit controls, we have the audio clip mixer and so on, there's the Lumetri scope tab. You can click on that and it kind of gives you the waveform panel. And now you can right mouse click this and you can add different things. But for right now, I'm going to leave this on, and later on I'm going to show you what a few of the other ones are. But let's just head over to the right hand side, and there's a few different options to be able to change certain things. You notice under here there's a couple sliders. There's a slider for the temperature. There's a slider for the tint. You can obviously go back and forth. And remember, if you ever move it, if you double click on the circle, it'll take it back to default. There's also the exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. And then there's saturation down here. And there's also an auto and a reset. So, if you get kind of too far where you realize, oh, I've just messed it up too much, if you just click reset, it'll put everything back in there instead of having to individually click on each one and then go back to the middle. Just click reset and it'll reset this section right here to the middle. Right above the temperature slider, you notice there's a WB selector. That's for white balance selector. So let's just pretend the image is way too blue. And if you click this and you drag it over something that you know is pure white that you want to match the color to, like for example, if I just click this, you'll notice how automatically kind of adjusted for me. Now I'm going to redo that again, and I'm going to pick something that's not necessarily white. Say we go over here to this little blue balloon, and we click on it, it overcompensates it to the extreme direction thinking that blue is white. So as long as you know whatever is white, that's a good starting off point. So let me go back over here and we'll do this little balloon. And see, that kind of brings it, it's showing here on the slider, it's a little cooler than it was before, but that is the general guess that the computer did. One other thing you can do, if you click here, you'll notice look at the width of the dropper. Now I'm going to hold down Command on a Mac or Control on a PC, and I'm going to click it, and then now click it again. You'll notice how it became a little more fat, like the dropper is a little wider. Now what this does is this kind of takes the 5 pixels surrounding the pinpoint and takes an average. So sometimes each pixel is a little bit different. So you have the smaller dropper, it'll just take that 1 pixel, where this one will take an average of the 5 surrounding pixels, which will give it a little more accurate. So I'm going to click on this again. I did notice that brought that a little more to center. So that's a very good tool, the white balance selector. I use that quite a bit. I'm going to reset this to the middle. And like I said, the temperature gauge, you can slide to the right if you want to make it a little more warmer. Say you want to kind of emphasize the sunset time or a little more magic hour. Or if you want to be kind of, more of a cool, cold, kind of empty feeling, you can play with the coolness. There's also the tint slider, which will add a little more magenta and or green. And the exposures, you can brighten it up. But you notice a lot of the whites are becoming blown out. And you notice over here, the waveform is changing. I'm gonna go back and reset this. Now, as far as this waveform, you'll notice there's a number 100 up here. And then the bottom, there's a 0. So the 100 represents all the whites and the 0 represents blacks. So you'll notice when I raise it up, I'm going to raise the exposure to the top. You can see it rises. Obviously, this is blown out, and you can see it smashes up here on the 100. And that's just indicating that it's clearly overblown and the whites have lost all the detail. So I'm going to reset that here. And now you notice here's the 100% line. Everything's just below it. So it's bright, but it's not smashed. The detail is not lost. But now if we do the opposite, if we bring the exposure down, you'll notice everything sinks to the bottom and comes really close to the black line. The wave monitor is a good test to see where the lines are, if it's too heavy or too dark. So I'm going to reset this, and you notice everything kind of spreads out through the middle. If you slide the contrast, obviously the whites are going to go a little brighter, the darks are going to go a little darker to add more contrast. You notice a lot more of the mass is pushing north to the top because there's a lot more lighter and highlights and whites in the image we're adjusting. So I'm going to bring this back down. And now the highlights and the shadows will be more the midtones for the light and the dark. So the highlights will bring up more of the middle section here, raise it, and then the shadows, of course, if we bring it down, you'll notice it just kind of takes the middle weight and brings it down from there. Where if we do the black, or we do the whites only, it's the higher section up here because it's the brightest point. It's not the midtones because it's just the pure white. And then the black, same thing. If we lower it, it's going to focus on just the darkest parts. Where in this image, there's not a lot, but you notice down here by the gentleman's leg, obviously that's black. And that's where you're seeing this line black out to where there's no more detail left in the image. You reset that. And then of course, saturation saturates the color. So if you have a warmer set, it's just going to amplify more of the color, whatever color that is. So if it's extra cool blue and you do saturation, it's going to make the blues that much richer and that much stronger. Now I'm going to reset all these. Now in this Lumetri Scopes panel, there's a lot more than just this waveform. If you right mouse click, there's a vector scope HLS. There's also the vector scope YUV. There's also the histogram, and there's also the RGB. Now the RGB is the one I use quite a bit. I'm going to click on this, and you can add this. So you can add as many as you want. So let's just say we click all of these. It's going to just add all of them. So you have different ways you can watch your colors, watch your highlights, watch your darks. But me personally, I don't use a lot of these. So I'm going to undo some of them. Now the two that I use a lot is I'll use this one, which is just the standard waveform. And then I also use the RGB, which is the different colors. So going back to this temperature gauge, and remember, you never want to smash up here to the top, and you also never want to smash here to the bottom. Kind of find the happy medium somewhere in there, and that way you can watch if it's overblown or too dark. But now we have the RGB, which focuses on the color specifically, not the waveform on the left that focuses on the lights and the darks. So let's go back to the RGB side and pay attention to this. I'm going to make it much warmer. So I'm going to grab the temperature and I'm going to bring a lot more warmth into it. And you'll notice as I go to the extreme, the reds came up and smashed, and the coolness, because we went the opposite here on the blue, we went to the opposite, so the blue dropped down substantially. The green kind of stayed in the middle, and then the red was smashing up here at the top. Clearly too much red, and you can tell in the image. But if I reset that, and I go the other direction, and I make it extra cool, you'll notice in the RGB waveform that the blues are completely smashed out here, indicating there's clearly too much blue, and it's not balanced just by the view of this. So the RGB tab is really nice to follow to find that right balance of color. I'm gonna reset this. And like I said, you can also just manipulate, the same thing with the tint. If it's too much green, you can see in the image it's clearly washed out with green. And here in the middle, the greens are pushed up much higher than the reds and the blues. So that's just a good thing. And sometimes depending on the look you want, a little bit more blue to make it cooler and kind of colder, you can cheat it the way you want, and or if you want to warm it up for, like I said, sunset or that kind of warm, more romantic feeling. Now, one thing I want to focus on real quick is the difference between color correction and color grading. Color correction is if this image is completely underexposed, you can tell by all the waveforms it's smashed here at the bottom, and just from a visual standpoint, it looks way too dark. Color correction is correcting that underexposed film and or video. And if it's overexposed, trying to bring it down and make it more natural. That's more of a color correction. You're kind of fixing the mistakes, or if you're kind of correcting maybe mistakes in the way it was shot, or if you didn't have the proper lighting and you're trying to adjust that mistake, that's more of a color correction. And color grading is more of a style or a vibe. You're trying to create an emotion through tones, and something's really dark and moody. That's kind of more of a color grading. You're making an artistic choice to give it a visual look, versus the color correction is you're kind of fixing a mistake. You're fixing something that's underexposed, or not enough contrast. You're adjusting, you're color correcting to fix those mistakes. That's a little more color correction, where the color grading, like I said, is just a mood or a vibe or a look or a style you're trying to come across. And that's a whole nother thing. And it gives you a basic understanding of the sliders over here and kind of what they'll do for your image, and also ways you can customize your waveform or your different type of RGB or whatever you want to kind of customize in here in the source panel. I hope this was helpful and you learned something, and if you did, please give the video a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. And like I said, if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel, because I am constantly creating new videos for you. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch you next time. Later.